Mary Burr. I worked 32 years in Cutco accounting.
My name is Andrea Heller. I am a hospice and palliative care medicine physician.
I first became aware of Alzheimer's when my grandmother fell and broke her hip and was in the hospital and never came home again. It was hard because there was a lot of things that she'd say and people would laugh at it, and I'm like, why? Why are you laughing? And I remember my mom saying, because if we don't laugh, we would cry. And I still didn't get it until later on when my father got Alzheimer's. My dad was in banking, and he loved his job and was very devoted to it. You know, I think a fond memory I have of my dad is that every night after dinner, we would be doing dishes and he would go in and play the piano every night after dinner. When he retired, he was the world's best grandpa. He didn't miss a baseball game. He was always there.
I just remember Grandpa was very, almost seeming like formal and regimented in the way, he conducted his life, which I think kind of speaks to his banking background, that, he was always dressed in the morning, always did his calisthenics or aerobics or whatever he did. And you could notice in the beginning of the disease, I think, we were talking about this before we came, that we think he had it longer than the time that he was actually diagnosed. I think he might have been really good at hiding some of that, but there reached a point where just in his eyes, I think he looked different in his eyes, like that understanding, that sharpness wasn't like it used to be. He used to play math games with us a lot when we were kids. Again, the banking thing. And I remember rapid fire 2 + 4 - 8 + 6. And at the end, if you were right, you got a quarter. And there weren't any of that. I mean, we were a little bit older at that point, but those weren't there anymore.
It was a little difficult, and Mom was determined that she would take care of him, and we tried to help out as much as we could. But again, there was guilt whether you could be the caregiver or give the caregiver a break, or guilt if you were missing your kids' activities because you were doing the other, and it was a no-win situation.
There was one time when I was in high school, maybe it must have been like 9th or 10th grade, and there was starting to be talks of, maybe this is more than we can handle, and maybe we need to talk about an assisted living facility or a nursing home. And I remember my brother and I just being like, how can you do that? How can you do that to him, And there was one night where Grandma was sick. She was still at home, but she was sick and couldn't do the all-night thing. So Mom said, come on, we're going up. We're gonna go take care of him. I said, okay, and we went up there, and it seemed like that was a particularly restless night, but I wasn't there. So maybe it just seemed like that to me, but he was up and down. And he would just sit down and get comfortable, and 30 seconds later, he'd pop back up and he'd be going to do something. So we were sleeping but waking up, and almost like with a newborn. And I remember in the morning when we went home, I said, okay, so I get to stay home from school now. And Mom's like, no, ma'am, this is what Grandma deals with. Grandma doesn't get a day off. I'm not getting a day off. This is what we're doing. And I think that was the moment. I was like, wow.
Get help right away. Don't be the hero, because I think it gets to a point where you're no longer able to give what they need. And as it progresses, they don't know whether you're their wife or who you are. So give yourself a little bit of break.
I think that's very similar to what I would say, get help early, because once you're doing this for so long, in my experience from what I've seen, so many times spouses lose that role as a wife or a husband, and that role gets taken over by being the nurse and the aide and the medication manager. And I think you're robbing yourself and your loved one of that time if you don't allow yourself to just be the wife or the husband or the daughter. So with palliative care, I take care of patients who have chronic serious illnesses. seeing everything that Grandpa went through and seeing him go through that progression, the different levels of care. We talked a little earlier about the team, and seeing the team that Grandpa had taking care of him, and also the team that he had taking care of not just him, but us as well. And I think that's really what drove me to want to go into the field of medicine and even further into the role of palliative care, to be able to be a part of the team that takes care of the team.
As we were preparing for this, I went through his funeral book and was amazed at how many people came to his visitation and his funeral. And I met so many people who said, wow, your dad gave me a loan when nobody else would do it. Your dad helped me start my business. Your dad, and those were things I never had heard prior to that. It was important to more than just us.